I coined the phrase leadership by serving around, and I meant something really, really specific about it. It's called, in my world, it's called How Can I Help Leadership, where it's a strategic act. It's not a management or leadership style, James. It's a strategic act. And let me just stop right here for a moment. Everything I talk about is driven to improve the performance of the business. It's not just being done because it's a cool idea or a crazy notion. Everything that I'm talking to you and your listeners about today, it is proven to drive performance. If it didn't drive performance, we wouldn't be having this conversation, and I never would have done it. So when I talk about serving around, asking how can I help, I'm doing that because my experience was that that was an absolute key ingredient to driving the financial performance of a business that I was given responsibility for that eventually ended up getting $1 billion a year.
Welcome to another episode of the Leading to Fulfillment podcast, where everything we talk about is meant to encourage people-first leaders, empower individuals to achieve fulfillment, and to help your organizations become places people love to work. I'm your host, James Laws, and I have an interesting show in store for you. My guest for this episode is Roy Ossing. Roy is a former president, CMO, and entrepreneur with over 40 years of successful and unmatched executive leadership experience in every aspect of business. As president of a major data and internet company, his leadership in audacious, unheard of ways took the company from its early stage to $1 billion in annual sales. He is a resolute blogger, keen content marketer, dedicated teacher, and mentor to young professionals. As an accomplished business advisor, he is the author of the no-nonsense book series, Be Different or Be Dead. He is devoted to inspiring leaders, entrepreneurs, and organizations to stand apart from the average, boring crowd and achieve their true potential. In my conversation with Roy, we discussed the definition and qualities of an audacious leader, how you can be an audacious leader towards your team, some of Roy's principles or methods of being an audacious leader, and leading by serving around. But first, I want to invite you to subscribe and leave a review for the Leading to Fulfillment podcast in your favorite podcast tool. We are literally all over the place. You can find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, and you can even watch us over on YouTube. Now, let's jump into my conversation with Roy Ossing. Roy, thank you so much for joining me on the Leading to Fulfillment podcast today.
Hey, listen, thanks for having me. And I'm grateful to have an opportunity to talk to anybody I can about my stuff. So thanks, James.
Absolutely. And you have some stuff coming out, actually at the time that this airs has already come out, so they can get it. We're going to talk about that. But before we do that, I want them to hear a little bit about what you're all about. One of the things that you talk about and is the premise of your new book, and it's been the premise of your life's work, is this idea of audacious leadership. And just for those who, we know audacious, we know leadership, let's put it together for them, just kind of plain and simple. What is your definition of an audacious leader?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. Its genesis really is in the word breakaway. My whole life, from a leadership point of view, and it's been a long life, um, has been to really um, walk away from tradition in many respects. I was part of a telecom world that went through a huge change a few decades ago when the hordes were allowed into the business, and so suddenly we found ourselves with competition. And my assessment was we weren't ready. We weren't ready from a marketing point of view. We weren't ready from a sales point of view. We weren't ready from a service point of view. I mean, we had a voice culture, a voice dominated product line, engineering domination versus marketing, etc. So my conclusion was, if we were to be successful, we have to move away from that. And I'm not talking about pivot. Okay, I don't like the word pivot, James. It's not strong enough. It's not audacious enough. It's like kind of like move on the fulcrum. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about getting rid of that fulcrum and move into another space. That's breakaway. So that was a source of what turned out to be a leadership style that I've tagged audacious, because what it does is it basically moved from traditional practices into different practices, which seemed to work for me because I was able to lead an organization to achieve $1 billion in sales. And I always go back to that. You can trust that this stuff works, right? Because I actually did it. And so, for example, like audacious leadership talks about differences, not similarities, right? It talks about being the only one, not one of many. It talks about executing, not planning. It talks about customers, not products. It talks about serving the front line, not taking care of your boss. And so all of these kind of like juxtapositioned philosophies kind of make up what turned out to me for me to be a very different, challenging, and rewarding leadership career, and which was completely different from the way everybody else approached it. Like the thing that I find frustrating is that leadership today, quite frankly, tends to be promulgated by textbook thinking and academics, and who are going with the way things are supposed to work. The problem is they forget about human beings in the equation a lot of times, because humans react to different things. They don't react to formulas, they react to feelings, right? They don't react to prescriptions, they react to passion. And so one of the things about audaciousness, if you can't light a fire, then you're not audacious. And I've had people say to me, "Well, come on, Roy, audacious. I mean, that can be edgy. That can be." I said, "Look, at what I'm talking about here is having the boldness to step out, right? Having the courage to step out and not be part of that herd, not be part of that crowd." Because the problem with the crowd thinking is it's comfortable, it's warm, but it's really boring, and it doesn't create uniqueness, doesn't create innovation. And so the source of stepping out and being audacious is all about creating energy, fire, to do things differently, create a different path. And actually, it turns out you can be really, really successful when you're doing it. So what I'm trying to do is light fires, James. I'm trying to light fires in people around the whole notion of you got to be crazy, not normal. You have to be
And
crazy.
I love it, and obviously, I'm a fan of books. I read a lot of books, but you're right. There are tried and true leadership principles that you can learn from the academics, and you can learn from business leaders who have written and have come before you. But in the end, you are a unique individual, and you have to figure out who you are with all those leadership principles, with all those ideas, and you don't have to discount those, although you should test them and experiment with them and find out how true they are for you. But you do have to find your own voice. You have to find out who you are going to be as a leader, because people are going to be attracted to the authentic you, not the you that you tried to pretend to be because you read the latest Simon Sinek book or Adam Grant or Patrick Lencioni. Like, those are great leaders, but they actually found their authentic voice. They found out who they are, and that set them apart. I want to ask you a question, because when we talk about audacious leadership and leadership in business, there's a lot of things we can talk about, right? We can talk about marketing, we can talk about customer service, we can talk about product development and strategy and finance and all of the things that make a business. But on this podcast, we focus primarily on the people that we lead. And I would love to hear your perspective on how do we take on audacious leadership, the tactics of audacious leadership, the methods of audacious leadership towards our team, not just to our teams. How do we serve them as an audacious leader?
Yeah, so excellent question. So it starts out with the word serve. I got very frustrated about this whole notion of management by wandering around, which, quite frankly, is kind of like meandering through the workplace looking for stuff, right? Which always bothered me, because you may observe something, but you're not participating in it. And I think that's part of what you're trying to get at here. So I coined the phrase leadership by serving around, and I meant something really, really specific about it. In my world, it's called how can I help leadership, where it's a strategic act. It's not a management or leadership style, James. It's a strategic act. And let me just stop right here for a moment. Everything I talk about is driven to improve the performance of the business. It's not just being done because it's a cool idea or a crazy notion. Everything that I'm talking to you and your listeners about today, it is proven to drive performance. If it didn't drive performance, we wouldn't be having this conversation, and I never would have done it. So when I talk about serving around, asking how can I help, I'm doing that because my experience was that that was an absolute key ingredient to driving the financial performance of a business that I was given responsibility for, that eventually ended up getting $1 billion a year, right, in annual revenue. So I just want to clarify that these aren't just cool notions, these are strategic acts. So leadership by serving around, what does it do? It serves the execution of the strategy. How does it do that? It does that by asking how you can help people and help them do their jobs better, doing it the way they want to do it, right? As opposed to the way the organization, impersonal organization, might impose on them. So I used to spend, copious amounts of times serving around the workplace, asking people, okay, I'm here. This is a president of the company walking around saying, how can I help, James? What can I do to help you? What's going on in your job that's preventing you from what? Executing my strategy. Okay, because that's the plan here. I want to know what's preventing you from executing 100%, because if I can figure that out, my performance as an organization goes up and I get closer to the billion. Boom, simple stuff, right? Well, you have to earn the right to ask the question as an audacious leader. You have to prove that when you tell me, I listen and I actually do something about it. Okay. So the how can I help thing was huge for me. And it led to things like silly, crazy little strategic programs like killing dumb rules. Well, that was one of my favorites. It was really, really, really important, because what I discovered from frontline people was that one of the major sources of aggravation with employees dealing with customers are all the stupid internal policies and rules we had that basically pissed people off. Okay, it upset customers. They didn't like to do business with us that way. And so I created this dumb rules initiative, which had an objective to seek out and destroy or otherwise change dumb rules, the rules that really prevented customers from liking to do business with us. And it was amazing. The fires it lit was just unbelievable. We had dumb rules contests in the workplace, okay? We had dumb rules, and we did not have any difficulty getting suggestions because frontline people know the stupid things. So it was part of my what I called cleanse the internal environment initiative. Killing dumb rules, contests, fun in the workplace. I'd show up in a workplace with a white T-shirt with dumb rules and a big X through them, right? Just to have fun. And we had winners, and we just went at it that way. It was a way to engage people in the strategy on in terms that they loved to participate in, right? Because killing dumb rules is not just a fun thing to do, it's a strategic act. Because when you do it,
Yeah.
you aid execution and boom, up goes performance. So there were a number of things like that I did. And people would say to me, well, you mean that seems pretty simple, seems kind of like blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, it's not, right? Are you telling me that those acts that help build a business to $1 billion in sales aren't strategic? And of course, right away they go, oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. You always got to remind people that it's performance based stuff. That's why we're doing this as leaders, James. We're not just doing it because it's cool.
Right. Yeah. No, I love everything that you're saying, and I think about those dumb rules. We've all been a part of organizations, right, where rules have been developed over time because of a mistake here or an adjustment there, and what they really do is they just tie the organization's hands from being able to make decisions that serve the customer in their best interest. You see this all the time with things like refund policies and all kinds of other things. And our support team knows, like, we have a refund policy? Sure. Do I expect any of them to hold to it? Absolutely not. Like, no. Like, yeah, you have it for the customer. They need to know that there's a certain policy and there's a certain understanding. But if we have a customer who's not being served well by our product for some reason, I don't care how long it's been. We just refund it. Like, there's no reason in keeping them tied in and keeping their money and keeping them unhappy. We want to serve them as best as we can. And sometimes the way we serve them is letting them go. and helping them kind of adjust that. You also, I love this idea of how can I help uh, leadership style. I was thinking about it. There's a TV show that's on the air now called New Amsterdam,
I know.
and
He
it's
stole
a
my idea. He
I
stole
know
my
he
idea.
totally ripped it
He
off. His first
stole it.
day as medical director, he gets
I.
all of the chairs of all of the departments and says, "How can I help?"
It's the first
And
thing
then
I
he
said to
turns
my wife.
everything upside down.
First thing I said to my wife, because we saw the first episode, I said, "Oh my God, he stole my line."
I love it. And the whole show is about him
I
doing that
know.
very thing, right? Finding problems, finding dumb rules, finding things that don't serve the patient and saying, how can I help? And taking risks and turning it upside down to, sometimes great comedic effect.
But here's the other
But
thing.
it's cool.
Here's the other thing I just want to say about it. I mean, what's really important in this, and the New Amsterdam show uh, sort of exhibits this as well, and that is this leadership. I mean, it's a personal act. Okay, it's not like you're doing something on behalf of the corporation. I'm there as Roy, right? Just like Max is there as Max, saying, what can I personally do to help you, James, as an individual? It's not say, how can a company do a better job? That's not what it is. That's bull. I mean, who's going to believe that stuff? This is personal currency, personal relationships, and the power that's unleashed by this is unbelievable. Now, there's a reason other leaders don't do this. First of all, it's really hard work, right? Secondly, you've got to go down, quote unquote, which I hate the word, down in the trenches, right? Where people actually get messy, and you've got to get messy with them. And a lot of people believe that once they hit this executive level, for some reason, they're suddenly exalted and they're to be revered and they're up there in this ivory tower, blah, 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 which you can do that. And you can do it at the expense of executing your strategic game plan and driving high performance. I mean, so what I found is you need to be with the people who are getting the job done, and you need to be one of them. You need to be one with them. You're not there to tell them what to do. You're asking them, how can I help you do what you normally know what to do? There's a business up here called Cactus Club, and their motto inside the door is called the House of Yes. And so typically I always ask crazy questions. My wife leaves as soon as I start asking questions like, what is that? What does that House of Yes mean? Well, it means that we will do everything we can to say yes to what you ask us. And of course, when you probe this, you find it's not on the menu. They're going to do everything they can to actually provide it, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that philosophy is supported by leadership. I mean, everybody gets it, right? Which is amazing when you actually see it in action. So LBSA is the new icon is the new icon leader today, and we need more. We need more people making the journey from management to wandering around over to leadership by serving around, for sure.
I love it. As you talk about, and as I've read over some of your materials, you talk about some of these methods and principles and what audacious leadership is. And I made a note of a few that kind of stood out to me. I'd love to unpack them a little bit, maybe walk through them. For instance, one of the principles you talk about is crazy, not normal. Can we talk a little bit about that one?
Well, one example could be simply going 180 to the momentum that you're observing. I mean, one of the greatest sources of innovation is deciding, well, what if we went the opposite direction? Okay, what if we did things completely differently? And let me give you an example. And it's a simple example, is that it occurred to me, well, the subject is recruitment. How do you recruit people? Okay. So it occurred to me that in a world where customer service is absolutely critical, we actually need to find people who have this innate desire to serve others. If you can care about humans, then you just may be able to provide an amazing customer experience. And so when I looked at how we were recruiting, of course, nowhere was anybody ever asked, do you love human beings? And it occurred to me that that's a strategic question. And so what I did as president is I implemented a new recruitment policy, and it was aimed at finding those people out there that had this intrinsic part of their DNA that they just love to serve people. So the question became, how do you find them? Well, the interview process, which was completely 180 to the way any other interview process went, first of all, involved me. So it was pretty intimidating. We had a panel of people, including the president of the company, hiring people for frontline management positions. And I would ask them, do you like human beings, James? And James, what you would say is you knew it was a trick question. You just didn't know where I was going to go with it. So, of course, you said, yes, Roy, I love human beings. So then I followed up with the killer question that says, okay, tell me a story that would prove it. So you get two kinds of responses. One response is like from the academic, who intellectually they get what the what the question is, but they don't really have a good story that would prove it, right? And it kind of leaves you cold. But you have another kind of individual who gets it, who really is born with the loving humans gene, and they give you a story that is warm, passionate, emotional, and guess what it does? The story gives me goosebumps. So I would hire that person because they gave me goosebumps. Their story gave me goosebumps. It became known as the goosebump recruitment process, right? GRP, authored by yours truly. And it completely went against every HR. They said to me, Roy, you can't do that. You can't. I said, why can't I do that? I'm going to do that. So, excuse me, I got to tell you, I mean, we hired people. It's easy to teach them the job, James. What you can't teach them is how to like humans. You can teach them how to grin. You can teach them how to smile, but you cannot teach them to love human beings. And isn't that what customer service is all about? Answer, yes,
Right.
that's exactly what it's all about because it's about feelings and emotions. That's why people go, oh my God, I can't believe you saw my hand there. I'll tell you about that later. I can't believe the experience I just had. It's because they're feeling emotionally positive. Well, our job as audacious leaders is to figure out how to get people in our teams that exhibit those characteristics. And that basically is a tough job because they're born with them. And so I used to try and come up with gimmicks to expose those sorts of things because I can always teach them about products and services. What I can't teach
Yep.
them is how to love people. There's an example.
Very cool. So that's crazy, not normal. The next one I think really lines up too really well with what we talk about a lot, what I write about over on circles.com. Tell me a little bit about individuals, not crowds.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's face it, the focus for the last, I don't know how many years, especially from a marketing point of view, is to focus on the masses. So let's take a product or service and let's target it. No, let's not target it. Let's just throw it out there to as many people as we can, hoping that it's going to get some take. Okay. Well, the reality is that marketing programs that actually are based on mass markets aren't very productive because mass markets, quite frankly, don't exist. Right? It presumes that everybody's the same. Well, we're not the same. Okay, you're different than I am. I'm different than other people. And so the challenge becomes how can I get the organization to actually target specific? I call it going nose to nose with a customer, targeting that person based on what they crave. Okay, that's the marketing side of it. The other side says, as a person, being part of a crowd sucks. It really does. I mean, you have absolutely no identity. You're not motivated because it's so warm and cozy and safe being in that crowd, right? You're not exposed, et cetera, et cetera. And so my my angst is to try and figure out a way to get people to step out of that. And part of the difficulty is that we've been taught to be part of a herd. We've been taught to color inside the lines. We've been taught to follow formulas. We've been taught by our parents, don't you stand out and have anybody notice you, Roy, at school, in kindergarten, etc., because it's presumed that when you stand out, you're doing something naughty. And so everything has taught us not to be part of the non-blenders in, if you want. We've been taught that it's expected to be part of the crowd. And the problem with that is it doesn't lead to innovation and creativity, and it's stultifying. I mean, we'll talk later about what does it do when you're part of a crowd in terms of declaring your competitive advantage over somebody else. It's impossible to do it. And so if you're marketing your organization, you need to figure out what individuals within a mass market looks like. If you're an individual, you need to figure out how to get out of the herd, how to get out of the crowd and be who you are. Figure out what makes you special and be special to others. And for me, that's always been something that is always been rewarded. It's the right strat. At least it was for me, the right strategy to take.
And what I like about this is this applies internally in our organizations as well. We have this idea of creating job descriptions that we just assume apply for everyone who might apply for this role. And what we realize is you can create a general idea, but when that person comes on that team, they are a unique individual. They're not one of many that could fill this role. They're a unique person filling this role, which means the role has to be adjusted and adapted and changed enough to fulfill the individual, because we are in an organization of people. It's not all communications team members are not the same, all customer service team members are not the same, all engineers are not the same. And so you want to find out what makes them unique, what makes them tick, what makes them an individual, and then help cater their roles. Yes, they're still an engineer or they're still whatever they are, but how they fulfill that role, how they fit into that team is extremely unique. So I love that idea of individuals, not crowds. I got one more that I want to go through, and then we'll kind of shift gears. I love this one a lot. Helping the front line, not the boss.
Again, everything I talk about is aimed to enhance the execution of your strategy. Okay, it's really hard for me to imagine that my boss, by catering to my boss, that's going to help execute the strategy. Won't It's got nothing to do with it, right? That's kind of like a hierarchical thing. Frontline people own execution. They just do, because it's at the coal face where the company meets customers that transactions happen, loyalty is established or not, and cash flow is exchanged. Which is pretty simple to me. It occurred to me a long time ago that if I'm not spending time with frontline people, reinforcing our strategy, taking care of them, asking how I can help, all of that kind of stuff, if I didn't do that, then execution was going to suffer. And so, as a leader, I mean, I was always out there, and to the point where I would have to ask for forgiveness from my boss if I had to cancel a meeting with him because I had to attend a vital bear pit session, I called them, with frontline people who had some serious issues to deal with for me. And they wanted me, they needed me. And so I just said, hey, I got to go. Well, the first couple of those incidences, my boss was asking a lot of questions about it. But sooner or later, he could see how important it was, and he turned into an avid supporter. I was lucky. There are other leaders who find themselves in positions where they may not get the support, and so they may decide to back off that. But when you back off, or what I call snub the front line, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. It's just no doubt about it. It's one of the key ingredients to better execution. Get the hell out of your office or your house, wherever you're working. Go spend time with the people that actually matter. Frontline people, they matter.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this has been just kind of a little bit of a taste of some of the things that you've been writing about and been talking about. You have a new book that has, as of the airing of this particular podcast, has just recently come out. Would you give us a little bit of an idea of this book and the ideas, why you wrote this book, and what you're hoping people can get out of it as they pursue it?
So the first thing I have to declare is it's not new stuff. Okay, it's
Right.
it's it's deeper stuff. So I started writing about Be Different or Be Dead in 2009 when the economy sucked and businesses were having difficulties surviving. And I was hoping that it would make a difference. But the concepts, etc., are literally that old, which amazes me that they have such resonance today. Although, as we pointed out earlier, the demographics of the workforce have changed, the economy is changing, et cetera, et cetera. And so what I decided to do is update that original book, because every time I have a conversation like we are now, every time I write blogs, I always learn more about my stuff. It's just amazing. It just uncovers more and more layers. So I decided to do kind of like a revised, updated version of Be Different or Be Dead. And so that's what led to, yes, the new book is out by now. It was out on May the 31st in printed version, although it was out in ebook fashion February the 1st, I believe. And it's basically taking the same organizational elements like careers, like marketing, sales, service, strategy, etc., and giving them a bit of an uplift based on new information and new experiences that I've had. And so I'm just continuing to bang away at the same principles. If you're not different, you're dead or soon will be. I mean, that's it. All right. Audacious leadership is part of that. And yeah, I'm just working hard at it, trying to change the conversation out there, getting people to stop copying and start creating.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I'm constantly talking to my team about as well. We just recently, we just got, as of we're recording this, we just got off of our team retreat where we kind of flew everyone in to spend a week together, talk about where we're going and where we've been, and I just how do we kind of connect and create these kind of relationships that will take us into the next year, and empower us to do more. And one of the things that I was talking to them about as we were kind of making some shifts and changes is that uh, the next great idea, the next great innovation, is likely not coming from me. It's probably coming from them. I have to be wise enough to hear it. I have to be wise enough to kind of pull it out and develop it a little bit, but it's probably not coming from me. And therefore, I need my team, all of my team, to be audacious and take risks and try things out. Because at the core of it, my philosophy on business has always been experimentation. That if you just sit and do nothing, you have to observe the world. You have to make hypothesis. You have to say, I think if I make this change, this is what I think will happen from that. And then you got to test it. You got to actually do the thing. As you talk about, you have to execute on it and say, am I right? Like, does the data come back and say I was right on my hypothesis? And sometimes you're not. And you fail, and that's okay. And you learn from that. And you pick yourself up and you say, what's the next observation? And let's do it again.
Yeah, I mean, tries was what I call them. Tries is another key strategic concept. I mean, it's forcing failure. And if you're not failing, you're not doing anything. The only thing I add to that is I never was a fan of people making the same mistake twice. So I'm
Oh,
okay
yeah.
with you making the first one. Don't you dare. Don't you dare make the same mistake again, because that says you didn't learn from the first one. Right? So even that interesting concept has got a discipline that's driven by performance objectives around it. I mean, there's no free lunch here. This is not kind of like a whoa world where you get to do whatever you want to do. It ain't, right? If that were the case, then you should have your own business and good luck with that and see how long that's going to last, right? There has to be some discipline. But within that discipline, there can be freedom. That's my point. The context is, what are you trying to achieve strategically? Okay, the freedom can be sometimes how you do it, and even that is got some interesting challenges, James. Like I was asked about the holacracy the other day. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so well, I'm not a fan, and I'll tell you why I'm not a fan. Okay, because I can see all sorts of dysfunction, only because I'm not comfortable and confident in the state of leadership in the world to allow that to flourish. Okay, because what it says to me is that, okay, go do your own thing, literally. And I'm saying, no, we need to have playgrounds defined for people to run around in. Okay, and
Yeah.
the reason that is so important is because I'm responsible for performance of the organization. At the end of the day, I'm quite willing to have maximum degrees of empowerment throughout the organization, all driven by one simple principle: because it serves the organization's strategy better. It's a better tactic. It's not an end to itself. Okay. And what bothers me about concepts like that is they end up to get their own life and are looked upon as ends unto themselves. One of the biggest leadership responsibilities that gets failed is what I call line of sight. A line of sight says, as a leader, my role is to make sure that every employee, and I had 10,000 of them, every employee in my organization understands clearly what their role is in terms of executing the strategy of the business. If you have that locked, this line of sight, so you and I, if I'm your manager, you and I get to agree on what you need to do new, what you need to give up, and then boom, you go ahead and do it. But at the end of the day, I'm holding you accountable for what we just agreed on. And quite frankly, as long as it's legal and it doesn't doesn't create all sorts of problems inside, you go do your thing. I'm happy with that. But to start out saying that's how we're going to run the business is absolutely ludicrous, in my humble opinion.
Well, so I'll tell you a story, which is that Holacracy book is sitting back here among the yellow books. We early on in my business, we adopted Holacracy for a little over a year. We tried it out because one, I love the idea of autonomy and flexibility and ownership, and Holacracy at its in the spirit of Holacracy, that's what it wants, right? But what I found is that it takes a very special group of people to operate well within Holacracy. And unless you have a group of strong personalities who can hold each other accountable in governance, in tactical meetings, and do that, what ends up happening is you're still just led by the few loudest people, and everyone else just kind of listens to everyone else, and Holacracy really requires everyone to participate in that process. So we eventually dissolved it and went back to a more normal structure, because what I found is probably similar to what you're saying. Is I found that teams work really well when given frameworks that act as guardrails, right? And say, hey, this is the philosophy, these are the guardrails, and anywhere in here, go nuts, take risks, try things, be sensible, but try things. Don't make risky risks, make sensible risks. But you can operate with full autonomy within these guardrails, because these guardrails are the strategy, the tactics, the understanding of our particular organization that we have laid out. And I found that most people that I've worked with appreciate giving me some defined guardrails and not keeping it completely open
Of
ended.
course.
Which there's a whole group of people,
Of
right,
course.
who just find themselves in the desert going, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm lost.
Well, that's part of the thing that line of sight leadership avoids.
Yeah,
Okay, but it requires you don't just throw it at the team and say go figure it out. First of all, that's
exactly.
ridiculous, because all that does is set the team up to fail. Why would you do that as a leader? You got to be able to define specific outcomes that's relating to strategy driven stuff. That's what it's all about. And if that's a world that you don't like, well, then you shouldn't be in that world, because at the end of the day, if we can't perform, none of us have a role. We're going to be really super autonomous, James. It's just that we're not going to be here. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And so there are ways of making it work. But I find the problem is it starts out assuming that it's an end, and it ain't an end. It's a tactic. So now the question becomes, it's a tactic for what? If it's not a tactic that serves executing the strategy, it's worthless. And now it says, how can I make it worthy? Well, then you get back to, okay, here's another element of audacious leadership. If the leader's not prepared to do this, you're going to be in deep trouble, because you're going to be there's a reason Zappos has dumped it and a bunch of other companies have dumped it. It's because it's internally focused. Zappos, by the way, got rid of it because it served the inside better than it served the outside. And so they found that customer service went down the tubes because there was so much internal stuff going on. Well, that's not a functional tactic. That's a destructive tactic. And so if you don't have a leadership set that's willing to take on the line of sight role, you've got some interesting challenges, in my view.
And I will say this to those who are listening to us talk about holacracy and they're like, "Oh, I was thinking about, looking at that book and blah blah blah." I say read the book. There are some ideas, right? There are some concepts in there that you can borrow. Matter of fact, there is some stuff that is stuck in our organization, some terminology and some things that we have adopted and adapted to our culture that work great for us. And so kind of like you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? Like there are some good things in there, and that's probably true of most books. Most books, you're not going to go and say, "I am wholesale going to just adopt everything that they say,"
Oh, with one
because
exception. Hang on a
except
second.
one exception. Obviously, Roy, your
My
book
book
is
is a
different.
no, but you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. There's always one or two or three or four things, regardless of what you read, that you can
Exactly.
pick out that will work for you. I mean, I did that my whole life, and it's absolutely true. Absolutely true. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's a matter of sifting through and figuring it out. That's all.
That's it. That's it. I love it. Hey, as we wrap up, I want to give you the last word. How can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you, if they want to acquire your books, if they just want to follow along and see some of the things that you're talking about and saying, where can they do that?
So I've got a website. It's bedifferentorbedead.com. And I would love for people to come visit me. I blog every week, so I just talk about my stuff. Every Monday, I write a new blog and it's published. And so I'm trying to make as many resources available for to people as I possibly can around this whole Be Different Audacious thing. So you can read my blog. There's a page there on my books, so you can get all of the 7 books and find out where to go to get them with a brief outline of each of them. And I guess the last thing, James, and I'm really happy to do this, is like I've got email, gmail.com, roy.osing@gmail.com. And I'm really happy to have a conversation with anybody who wants to talk about how to do this or question its value or ask how does it work or whatever, because I find that to our conversation a bit earlier, it's about really getting people individually hooked on the notion, convinced that it's a journey that they should follow, and then helping them along. And so I call it eating my own dog food. So I eat my own dog food by trying to help as many people as I can take that first step along the way. So by all means, email me. I'm happy to have a conversation.
I love it. So we'll put links to everything that we mentioned in this episode in the show notes. Roy, thank you so much for joining us on the Leading to Fulfillment podcast today.
I'm grateful. Thank you for having me.
I want to thank Roy for the very challenging conversation, and thank you all for listening. Everything we mentioned, including a full transcript of the show, is available over on our website, and you can access it anytime by visiting leadingtofulfillment.com/015. That's leadingtofulfillment.com/015. Also, on that website, you can subscribe to our newsletter, and there we'll let you know when all the new episodes become available, as well as send you original and curated content on leadership, managing teams, and finding fulfillment. Now, cars have come a long way in their relatively short time in existence. They've gotten faster, quieter, more comfortable, and most importantly, safer. From crash tests and safety ratings to seat belts, check engine lights, and lane assist alerts, you're far more protected in a modern car than one created 100 years ago. The key difference is proactivity. Automotive engineers and safety experts have taken steps to safeguard drivers and passengers before something terrible occurs. A seatbelt secures you inside the car before any potential impact, and a check engine light turns on before issues can become major. These changes evolved after years of experience, trial and error in the automotive industry. As a leader, you have ample experience to draw from as well, and you must do so to become a proactive leader. In this episode, Roy talked about execution and being proactive instead of reactive. So how can you become a proactive and perhaps audacious leader? Well, first, lead by your values. If you don't know where to start, let your values lead you. This is the key to making great decisions and problem solving, the hallmarks of proactivity. Also, know your team well. Proactivity means having a solid pulse on the energy and the people around you. To do that, you must invest your time into getting to know your team members. Try balancing overanalysis and anticipation. Being proactive requires thinking about all possible outcomes, enabling you to prepare for the best and the worst. But there's a fine line between endlessly overanalyzing and planning and adequately anticipating. Zoom out. When being proactive, it's easy to get lost in the here and now and the nitty-gritty. But true proactivity requires you to zoom out and take in the big picture. The future, more than the past or present, should be your main focus. And finally, take risks. No matter how much you anticipate every outcome, action always incurs risks. It's simply impossible to prepare for every twist and turn, but risks are a natural part of growth and innovation. Being proactive isn't rushing forward. Instead, it's grounding yourself in the traits you already possess as a leader: great problem solving and decision making, trust, sound judgment, and strong values. Then, and only then, you can move forward confidently, control the narrative, and be prepared for any outcome. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join me on the next episode. And until then, may your businesses be successful as you lead your teams to fulfillment.